time. Speaker. Check, check.
Testing.
Okay. Once again, roll call, please.
Anna here. Yeah.
Rillo here.
Kipchinsky here.
Lorick here. Kavich here.
Guzikowski here. Oldani here.
Seipert here.
Chandler here.
I will get us to the minutes of May the 9th, 2023. If everybody please take a look.
Oldani moves to accept the minutes of the Oak Creek Plan Commission meeting Tuesday, May 9, 2023.
Seipert seconds.
Before I do the roll call, Carrie, do you have me being excused, or am I included in that roll call? I think we need a correction. I believe I was here on the 9th.
Says Alderman Lorick called the meeting to order. If that is a correction, we can make that correction.
I believe that.
I believe I was excused that one,
Correct.
now that I'm reading it. So I did not call it to order.
All right, we will make that correction.
Perfect. Thank you. Any discussion on the amended minutes? Hearing none. Roll call. Christine?
Anna, I.
Rillo, aye.
Kipchinsky, aye.
Lorick abstains.
Gavich, aye.
Guzikowski. Oldani, aye.
Seipert aye.
Chandler, aye.
That will get us to review and discuss recent common council actions. Carrie?
Council made the following actions at their May 16th meeting. They accepted the North Bluff Planning Study, which is in the 4th District. They approved ordinance number 3073, amending section 170304C and section 17.1018 of chapter 17 of the Municipal Code, which is the zoning and sign ordinance relating to research and development facilities, and approved an amendment to TID 11 Finance Development Agreement for Emerald Row Phase 1, Second Amendment to TID 11 Finance Development Agreement and Phase 3 Agreement for Emerald Row Phase 2 and 3, and TID number 11 Finance Development Agreement for Emerald Row Phase 3 Parcels A and C in the 2nd District. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Review and discuss recent board and housing zoning appeal actions. There were none. And review and discuss the recent quarterly Parks and Recreation Commission actions. We will do that on July 11th, 2023. For the audience, if anybody is here for items 9, B, and C, those will be rescheduled to the meeting of June 13th, 2023. So if you're here for those particular items, they will be held tonight. That is a conditional use permit for a general office use on the properties at 7101 and 7115 South Pennsylvania Avenue. And item C relates to the same property as for a plan review for site building and related plans. So if you're here for that, there'll be no action, nothing taken on it. Okay, moving right along, we have public hearings. So our first one is a sign appeal, and we will hold it. It is for Ravel Investments for Altius Building Company and would allow the applicant to install one single tenant monument sign with a total of 48 square feet per side, and it's 8 feet in height. It has some flagstone, and it's single-sided, and will be on the north side of the property at 441 West Ryan. Sylvia, would you like to read that in the record?
Yes. A public hearing for a sign appeal will be held, date May 23rd, 2023, time 6 p.m., place Common Council Chambers. Appellant Michael Zielinski, Revel Investments, Altius Building Company. Key number 906-9028-001, property location 441 West Ryan Road, to request, 1, a variance from section 17.0604B1A, which states the maximum permitted sign area of single-tenant monument signs in any residential district, or the A1, B2, B3, and P1 districts shall not exceed 25 square feet. 2, a variance from section 17.0604B2A, which states the maximum permitted height of single-tenant monument signs in any residential district, or the A1, B2, B3, and P1 districts shall not exceed 5 feet. 3, a variance from section 17.0604B6, which states sign base. The base of single-tenant monument signs, including all structural components, shall extend horizontally from the sign face a minimum of 10% and a maximum of 25% of the width of the sign face. The base of single-tenant monument signs shall be constructed from traditional time and weather-tested materials and techniques, including masonry, stone, or similar high-quality materials in keeping with the materials and design of the principal building of the lot. If granted, the variances would allow the applicant to install one single-tenant monument sign with sign faces that total 48 square feet per side, is 8 feet in height, and with a faux stone base on a single side on the northeast side of the property at 441 West Ryan Road. Zoning of the property, RM1 multifamily residential with a conditional use permit. All interested persons wishing to be heard are invited to be present. Dated this 4th day of May, 2023.
Thank you, Sylvia. And as this is a public hearing, I will make 3 calls. Anybody wishing to speak, please approach podium, give your name and address. This will be the first call. Second call. Third and final call. We will now close the public hearing, and I will open it up to the commission for questions. Start us out. Jossie, you want to start?
Sure. I do have a question for the applicant.
You can go right up to the podium. If you want to sit at the table, you can as well. One of you want to be there?
Support you. So we're the applicant. I'm Eric Fors, representing Revel and Altius and the owners group. Paul is the sign designer that submitted the application that you're responding to.
Do you need the address?
Um,
Or are we okay?
Yeah, we do need the address, sir.
Of the individuals or the property?
It can be the property or the business.
Sure. My address is W992 Clayton Court in Burlington. The business address is 441 Ryan Road.
Okay, my question is in regards to the size of the sign. Can you provide more details on the reasons that it's almost double the requirement?
But I think, to be candid, we had sent out an RFP for the signage to be coordinated with the ordinances when the owner accepted the proposal. And I think Paul's designer grabbed a different zoning category than that is currently zoned. We thought it was a mixed-use zoning when they designed it versus the residential. So he was complying with the wrong ordinance. So that's why it was submitted that way. And if the variance is, right now the owner's kind of expecting to see that sign from what they accepted, but we understand that maybe there would need to be, if a variance is granted, that would be awesome, or a concession made is all on the table for us. So, given that we misunderstood the ordinance.
Okay, and then a question for Sylvia. With the size of the sign, that takes in consideration the stone as well as the sign and what the sign is hanging on, right, the entire space?
Actually share this is their proposal for the sign. So the square footage for the sign area is just looking at these 2 panels, the one in the center that says the Broadacre, and then the hanging sign below with now leasing is what we're counting as the sign area. The height, we're counting to the top of the, I guess, pedestal at 8 feet. The top of the portion with the sign content is 6 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Fred?
I think the sign is too big for the area. I don't see any other signs along Ryan Road that is this size. They're down within the normal standard that we have for the city. So I think this just is a little overkill. And that's my opinion. That's it.
If I could respond, Fred, to one thing we did look at was the city's sign to the east of the property at the police station, and then Edgerton's sign to the west. And they are in a different zoning district. So their signs are a little bit larger than the residential allows, and we were trying to fit, that size, that scale.
That's just my opinion. I look at the rest of the road in the area. It's a little bigger than the rest of them.
Thank you for that.
Don?
I have no comments at this time.
Chris?
No comment.
Greg?
I don't have issues, I guess, with the size. I can understand the reasoning to pull it back out of the easement and get it out of the vision triangle for safety. My only question is there a plan to eventually remove the now leasing portion, or do you plan to be in a perpetual state of leasing?
There is a plan to remove it. So basically, it's pretty important until the property stabilizes to advertise leasing. And we did look at the temporary sign ordinance with the city of Oak Creek, and it requires a lot of renewals for both the owner and the city. So we thought if we could design something into the permanent signage that would allow us, primarily for the stabilization period of the new property, that would save, both parties the time of going through that process. So it was a deliberate desire to include it in the permanent signage, but once we reach stabilization, that bottom portion would be removed.
Okay. Yeah, and I understand the need for advertising. It does probably look a lot cleaner than a temporary sign or sandwich board put up somewhere. Is it similar to a Realty sign that would say sold, that they would clip on the bottom of the sign? Like, is it easily removable?
It is. It's interesting that you said that. We actually studied putting that as a vane on top of that horizontal beam as well, but we felt it was too much like a Realty sign. So it is kind of a hook stayed to the bottom of the sign that can just be picked off and stored.
Okay, thank you.
Got it, Greg?
Yep.
Ashley?
Given the signs outside of any vision corners, engineering does not have any concerns with the sign.
Okay. On.
Question for Carrie. The now leasing is also something that I looked at right away. I hate to see every apartment is leasing at some point. And the other area apartment buildings don't have that. It's kind of like now hiring. It would be all the time. So can we put a part of the sign, have a contingency that it only lasts for so long?
So we cannot regulate content. So whatever they want to put on that panel, they can put whatever they want on that panel. If you don't approve of the panel, then it would just be that main panel. But again, we don't have anything in our capability to regulate any portion of the content of the sign. So they want to put now hiring, now leasing, vote for anybody, they could do that because we don't have the ability to control that.
Thank you.
Ian?
I agree with Fred. The sign is a little bit too large for that Ryan Road corridor, especially like you have Brentwood across the street. Their sign is not as large. You have the police station, so it's kind of overkill for the other businesses around that corridor. So I think it's fair enough for all of them for consistency, for all to be the same, and no exception unless there is a specific reason, which I haven't heard any that makes sense. So I agree with Fred, this is too large.
Okay. Guess I'll throw my 2 cents in. I think it's a really nice looking sign. I agree. I think the size is a little big. I don't know about the panel being there forever. I'd rather see it at the bottom of the main sign. That's what it's going to be, rather than that hanging panel, because that all gets incorporated into the square footage, correct?
Yes.
Because we just draw a box around the whole thing. We actually take it, include the wooden beam too from the end.
No,
Just
basically the two sign faces is
the
what
two
we're
sign
counting.
faces. Height-wise, I'm okay with it as long as, traffic and engineering didn't seem to have a problem with it. A little bit big, but maybe a compromise would be, the thing's currently 17 feet end to end. Maybe if you made it fit in a different dimension, it's really, the sign itself is 12 foot long.
Mr. Mayor, we did, once we realized our mistake, looked at similar proportion with a smaller sign box. And Paul had prepared a 2.5 foot high rather than 3 foot by 10 foot long to fit the ordinance with the main sign box. And the ownership would be willing for that to be a condition of approval, and we would proceed under those conditions.
So, yeah, that would be, I think it would really help. That's the 3 by 10.
2.5 feet tall by 10 feet long
2.5 by 10.
to hit the 25 square feet.
I like the brickwork, I gotta say that. I like the beam too, myself.
We were pretty happy with the design, and it does speak to the building. The Broadacre concept was a Frank Lloyd Wright contemplation, so to get that cantilever horizontal line was intentional to try to pay homage to that. Oh, you bet.
Only brought 3 copies, I'm sorry.
I'll give
Carrie's probably the most
Carrie's
important
table the other
record.
one. We can share up here. You got one, that one?
Yeah.
There you go.
The revision does still ask for the now leasing portion. And, again, it's 118 units in the building, and the intention is not for property management to put that out every time a unit's available. It is for that lease-up stabilization phase. Frankly, most people are looking online now anyway. It's just a matter of, it's identifying the destination while we're tenanting the building.
So I think, Greg, or did you ask a question?
That's a crystal ball question, but we usually plan a year from the last completion. So.
No, you stated it can be taken off or unhooked. Will you only hang it during leasing times, or will it just hang there all the time?
No, again, after we had our initial lease up, it would be removed. The ownership group prefers the sign without it, frankly, but we were trying to be proactive in terms of the temporary signage ordinance and just have the ability, as you mentioned, rather than a sandwich board, we could hang this, whenever there's a number of units available for lease.
So actually, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
Why can't you just remove the now leasing on the bottom? The sign actually would look actually more appealing, and have those board with those metal in the median part, or the terrace, or however you want to call it, and you can install it whenever you have availability and remove it when you don't. And those are going to be meeting the city's warrants and requirements, are going to be more appealing to us, and you're not going to have this and that. And
Sure. Well, the biggest reason we wanted to make it part of the permanent approval was I believe the ordinance allows us 2 weeks per approval, and we can only do it 3 times consequently. And when we've got buildings coming on to market a month or 2 apart, it would be impossible for us to comply with the ordinance and still meet this need. So we thought, well, let's be proactive and make it part of the permanent sign. And we did think it looks better than some of the temporary signage we can do as well. So those were the reasons we thought we'd do it and ask for the approval.
Discussion on the proposal, we were shown for possible approval at 2.5 feet by 10. Has everybody had a chance to see it?
If size-wise, that other proposal meets code, is the only variance the location?
It looks like as proposed, just doing some quick math, it looks like the sign area is still 34 square feet, which would still require the variance listed in number 1. And it looks like the height is also still over, the total height is over 5 feet. So it would still require that second variance
Okay.
as well. So 1, 2, and 3 would still all apply.
Okay, thanks. Either way, I don't have an issue. If more people are on board with the smaller sign and they're willing to do it, we can just have them reduce it.
Yeah. I would say that would be my recommendation, that the 2.5 by 10 would go. Wouldn't worry so much about the height. Sylvia, you said it's still over the height. I see it at 8 foot, ground to the top of the stone. Am I missing something?
On the new proposal, I'm not seeing the height listed to the top of the
Oh,
stone.
you know what? I'm
but
looking at the old one.
yeah, to the top of the
So it's
sign,
5.
it's showing 5 feet. So I'm assuming it's roughly 6 feet to the top
5.
of the stone. Just an
Yeah,
estimate on my part.
probably 6. Hey, you're still, it's
You
not
have
like,
that dimension.
not like we're sitting at 12, 10 feet. You know, given the size of it, the structure of it, we don't want that sign hanging on the ground either. That would look inappropriate as well. So, somebody's gonna have to make a motion, but if you're in favor of, again, we'll have the discussion here and now, but, the height is an obstacle, and the size. So the size has come down to 2.5 by 10. And the height remains at about 8 foot.
Just to clarify, the 2.5 by 10 is the larger portion of the sign, the part that says Broadacre. The part that says now leasing is another 1 foot by 8 foot.
Picking up, no, 33, about 35. And again, I guess the tricky part about this is, they definitely want to get up and lease. They want the sign there versus a temporary. They can't have feather flags and waving guys with furly arms and blow up things. So I think this is a better alternative. We just got to hope they decide not to leave it up, because we really don't have that other than to send out our compliance officer to ask them to do it on their own. Correct? Oh, man. See? Well, anyways, that was a lot to repeat. So anyhow, those are the things to get over. So discussion on anything? Questions?
Yeah, even if we send the compliance officer, what do they have to go by if we don't have anything in the?
They really can't in this situation, is
Yeah.
what I was trying to explain to Carrie
Yeah.
and Sylvia, but we could go out there as a city and ask them to remove it after a certain time.
Do we have something in the POG that we can force them to do that?
Well, they'd put it up at times of need for leasing, and of course they're in the ramp up to lease. That's why they want to do it. So I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a leap of faith with our development partner here that that's what their real intent is.
So just to interject, you would still have to approve of that sign being part of this sign.
Correct.
Otherwise, they would have to comply with the temporary sign ordinance, which we've already discussed as having some limitations for putting out temporary signs for now leasing, whatever they want to put on the sign itself. So there would be two options. You could just remove that one panel and make your motion very specific about what the dimensions are that you're approving. But I don't think that it's appropriate to necessarily talk about a different type of sign, meaning a temporary sign,
Right.
in addition to what's on the table before the Plan Commission tonight. But you
I
could
think
make,
ownership is in your corner on the now leasing
Sir, I'm sorry, I don't think the mic is picking you up even though you are projecting.
I'm sorry. I think the ownership team as a whole is going to want to remove that now leasing sign as soon as they can. The sign's more aesthetically pleasing without it. It's strictly as a business need to have it on there to bring the facility up to full occupancy or close there too. But they are going to be motivated internally to take it down whenever they can, keep it, save it, put it up only when we need it.
I would go further. I am a member of the ownership group, so I would commit that after stabilization, we'd take it down. There are people in the team that don't like it either. So it's,
Can you define stabilization?
so stabilization is once we reach majority of rentals in the 4 units.
How long that can take? It can take from now.
The,
No, it's
well,
just open-ended.
with approval, we would be able to erect the sign by mid-July, and the last building will be completed in January of '24. So it would be basically January of '25 that we would project being stable.
So that's
So
the
it's a
expectation.
16-month period.
Okay.
Before I want to get the opinion of our assistant fire chief as well. Just make sure they don't have any issues or they're seeing something we're not. So if you could, we got Assistant Chief Havey in the house tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Mike Havey with Fire. This sign really has very little impact for fire because it's really the address label is for a parcel. The buildings have individual addresses and labeling, so it really has very minimal impact for the fire department.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So going forward, there is a motion for consideration, but it's at 46 square feet, and I believe Sylvia said it comes out to the new proposal as is with the now leasing sign was 30.
We have 33, but we could also just list it by the square footage, say 2.5 by 10 feet and 1 foot by 8 foot, just in case my math is incorrect.
Okay, 2.5 by 10 and 1 by 8. With a height of 8 foot. Is everybody kind of clear on what the intended motion may be?
I believe the height of the updated proposal is approximately 6 feet.
6 feet?
What the designers did is they just took that proportionate representation of the bigger sign and mini-meed it. So
Okay. Don?
So this could set a precedent, I think, even though everything comes through. And no offense, but ownership might have even bigger motivation to keep it up. Money talks, you know what walks. And it's easy to say we don't want it because it looks bad, but we've taken the word from applicants before and gotten burnt. So I kind of disregard that when someone stands there and says, we had to take my word on it. I think we should stay as close to the ordinance as possible. If I want to just double check with Carrie, she said we could amend the motion to remove the small sign. Is that correct? Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation. We can live with a 2.5 by 10. That gets us very close, and there would have to be a workaround, whether you work with staff some more or figure out how to fit it all in to the 2.5 by 10. That's my take.
I believe if the hanging sign was eliminated, then first variance number 1 would not be needed because 2.5 by 10 is 25 square feet, which is the code maximum.
Actually, you wouldn't need a variance because it's 6 foot also. Correct?
It's 5 foot is the maximum.
Oh, 5 foot's the max.
Which the sign text is within the 5 feet. The stone portion is approximately 6 feet in the updated plan. So variance 2 would still be needed just to account for the extra height on the stone portion.
Okay.
Do you have a cursor to kind of point to?
This is what I'm referring to as the stone portion.
Okay.
The now leasing is the one I've been calling the hanging sign, just because as a reminder, everything is content neutral. That sign could say anything.
So when you say 2.5 by 10,
So the portion that says Broadacre Oak Creek, in their updated proposal, they're reducing the square footage there to a dimension of 2.5 by 10, rather than what was shown in the packet.
If the proposal would go as Don stated, their alternative would be come back with a temporary sign permit. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, those are your options.
I have another question
Yes.
for the applicant. So since the sign would be smaller, can the stone be shorter? And then you would meet all the requirements?
It will be shorter, but if it was 5 feet, the sign would actually be in the bushes. Because there are plantings that go around this as well. So we're trying to keep it above the ground cover.
Thank you.
It is reduced from what you're seeing on the screen, though. It's down to 6.
And I think it's actually a little bit more than 6, right, Paul? Because the beam's going to be 8 inches, and it looks like we've probably got a foot besides that, so it's probably closer to 6.5, maybe even 7. But it will be shorter.
Okay. Any further questions? Discussion? Okay. Motion?
I'd like to know.
Before we make a motion, I don't know what the whole committee's gonna. It's kind of what we're on the minus the sign or not minus the sign.
That's up to the individual making the motion action.
Okay.
So we really can't kind of straw poll it, but you either got to include it or take it out. So currently it would be 2.5 by 10 and 6 foot. If you included the other one, it would be 2.5 by 10, include it with a sign of 1 by 8. Clear as mud, isn't it?
Is holding an option? on
No,
this?
I wouldn't hold. I honestly, if you guys are having consternation over the now leasing sign, I'd work with the applicant to come in on a temporary basis, temporary sign basis. And if you, again, we don't want to vary off what we're doing, but I believe the temporary signs allow you 30 days, 3 times a year in the first year of operation. And I don't know if it can be consecutive.
so Don, why don't you just remove it and let's vote on it? I just say yes or no based on that.
If you need it, it's on this page. Recommended
Do you have a
proposal.
On
motion?
this page on the bottom, right
Tested
here.
motion?
Here, Don, you want it?
Motion. Okay.
It's not going to be very smooth.
I withdraw my section.
Oldani moves that the Plan Commission approves a sign variance allowing the installation of a monument sign with a total sign area of 2.5 feet by 10 feet square and a height of 8 feet near the northeast corner of 6.
Or 6.5, or
Not to exceed 6.5.
It could be as high as 7, but
Not
I'm
to-
just looking at the dimensions. The beam's 8 inches, is about a 4-inch gap below it. That gets us to 6 alone. I'd call it probably 8 for the pedestal above that, so it's going to be at least 6'8".
Not to exceed 7.
Okay, amending the height to not to exceed 7 feet near the northeast corner of 441 West Ryan Road.
Guzikowski, a second.
Just a clarification, there is also a variance request for the base itself. Because the base is not standard, if you will, because it's only on one side. So it doesn't technically meet the extension minimum of 10%. But if you just say a variance from section 170604B6 for the sign base, we will understand. The third variance request.
Is the variance gonna still be requested for the smaller size, or?
It doesn't matter. It's just for the base not exceeding, the base not meeting the 10% extension portion. That's all it is.
Terry, can you give more information when you say the base? What are you referring to?
Well, that's just it. This is a non-standard base. There's only a base on one side. Technically, the base would have to extend out from the sign a minimum of 10%. That's what the third variance is saying.
So it only has one side. Look in the public hearing. Here it is, Don.
Public hearing as the third variance. My apologies for leaving that out of the suggested motion.
No, just, we're working through it. Yes. Now, we have a motion and a second on the floor, but we have an amended addition to the motion. Sorry about this, who's ever doing the minutes.
Terry, this variance would be added to the motion as written, or is there any changes to that variance?
There would be no changes to the variance in number 3 as written.
Okay, so Oldani amends the motion to include variance number 3, a variance from section 17.0604B6, which states sign base,
Et cetera, et cetera. We got it.
what she said.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call, beginning with Dawn.
Grillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trust me, it gets smoother from here on out. All right.
That's all right.
Okay, moving right along. Item 8 is old business, item 8A. It's to review site building and related plans by Driven Brands for an accessory structure, trash enclosures, ground mechanical enclosures on the property at 6900 South 27th Street. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you will recall, this was held at 2 previous meetings to allow the applicant a little bit of opportunity to address some of the concerns raised by staff and by the Plan Commission. So just to orient everybody, this is a property that is zoned B4. There is a conditional use permit. The proposal includes pay kiosks, a trash enclosure, a vacuum equipment enclosure, some site modifications, and it actually also includes now building modifications. Also included are fabric canopies over the proposed vacuum station. So just to orient everybody, here's the proposed site plan. And there are a couple of areas that we had looked at previously. We're going to look at them again. So one of the concerns that staff had raised was for the installation of 2 parking stalls with vacuums in the northwest corner that had been installed post closure of that access point to 27th Street, but it didn't receive any local approval. They are now proposing to remove that, replace it with landscaping. So we appreciate that very much. In the pink are the relocated but still proposed pay kiosks. We have a little bit, we have new images to present to the Plan Commission, giving you an idea of just how those are set up and what they would look like. It wouldn't be 3 deep as shown in one of these photos. It's 2. There would be 2 lanes. So there would be 2 kiosks with the canopy covers. Just as a point of clarification, the signage that's on here is not included in this review. It's just for the structures themselves. As for the menu boards themselves, we did get dimensions, and they are less than the total of 100 square feet cumulative allowed by code. The green are showing the 2 enclosures. Now, they've actually been relocated. So the trash enclosure is now rotated, and in the former location of where the vacuum enclosure was going to be. So we no longer are losing that parking stall in front of the oil change building. The vacuum equipment enclosure is just kind of like a bookend on the other side of that 90-degree changed angle parking on the south side of the building. Both have their gates facing south, so inward to the parcel. The materials are CMU with metal gates. The dimensions are fine. Staff have no concerns for these proposed changes so far. This is just the other enclosure. So both are made out of the same materials. One is just slightly smaller than the other. In the blue, on the angled parking adjacent to or along 27th Street, that's where the vacuum canopies and the vacuum apparatus are going to be by those parking stalls. They're fabric shades. We don't have a color rendering of it, but it would be blue to kind of match the rest of the kiosks and everything else. But those would be over those appurtenances. The building modifications themselves mostly consist of paint, but there is the addition of this ephes and metal capped tower on the north corner of the car wash building. No changes are being proposed at this time to the oil change facility, so this is the only thing that we would be looking at for building modifications. And just as a point of, there are no other real changes to the architecture itself, just that tower. We did receive calculations for each of the building materials. ephes is only allowed as a maximum of 15% of the elevation with a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission. We did not see anything in the elevations with the building materials that seemed to indicate that they would be exceeding 15% of any elevation. Landscaping has also been proposed, giving you an idea of where they're proposing to put some trees, some shrubs. We do need to have them updated for code compliance. There are a couple of areas where it just doesn't meet the requirements, but we'll work with the applicant to make sure that those are revised with the resubmitted plans prior to permitting. With that in mind, there is a suggested motion in 2 parts on the screen for commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll go right to commission. Christine?
Yes, I have a question. So, Carrie, if you can bring back the previous screen. Yes. So my question, either to you or the applicant, can we increase the trees or the landscaping facing 27th Street to kind of shade those vacuums from that property, if that's possible? I know you're not going to disturb that planters there, but if we can add some more landscaping, because it's not really a pleasant view when you're driving along that corridor.
We'll need your name and address, sir.
My name is Chris Strickland. I work with JM Civil. The address is 1101 South Central Expressway, Allen, Texas. And yes, we could definitely update the landscape to have additional landscaping in the front.
So just the purpose is to kind of shield, like the vacuums.
Screening.
Yeah, so it doesn't really show that from the road. It's
yeah,
just unpleasant.
I think we can definitely accommodate that.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I guess I should say silence phones. Just kind of a habit. But anyways. Okay, carry on.
That's it for me.
Okay. Dawn?
No, nothing for me.
Ashley?
No questions.
Greg?
I know there's no modifications to the oil change building, but are they at least hoping to update the colors to match everything else? I believe it's red and yellow now. You know if they're changing that to blue so it matches?
I believe so.
Okay.
That information has not been provided to us, but I believe the corporate colors are to distinguish between the car wash and the oil change.
Also,
They might be staying different at this time, so if they do propose any changes to that building, they'd be back before the Plan Commission.
Okay. And then the fabric over the vacuums, do you know if this has been used somewhere else as far as the longevity of fabric in the sun? It's going to hold up pretty well, I'm hoping.
I can't really speak to it as the engineer, but I know they've used them all over the country.
Okay.
So
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Chris?
I have no questions.
Don?
No questions.
Fred?
No questions at this time.
Chauncey?
I do have a question for Carrie, just for clarity. One of the first slides, you showed I think those were the menu boards and the arches. So is this something that is staying with this request versus what we saw when it was held?
This is just giving you additional installation views of what was being proposed. So again, exclude the signage that's on there. Those are the same canopies that were proposed. They're just giving you a photo to go with a drawing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. As far as I go, it's, the metal panels, I don't have a problem with it. I really don't. It's an update to the building. Building's been with us quite a while. We've had a few iterations of it. It's nice to see them investing some money in it, kind of bringing it up to standards, what the expectations and the competition is out there. So nice to see that. So I really don't have a lot of problems with any of the improvements or the paint that's going on. I'd rather see this than it be ill-maintained.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I don't have any questions. Is there any further discussion? Anybody else wishing to speak on this? Okay. We'll look for a motion then.
Guzekowski make a motion that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans submitted by Elena Fashion Driven Brands for paid kiosks, trash equipment enclosures, and fabric vacuum canopies on the property at 6900 South 27th Street. The following conditions: 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that the photometric and lighting plans are provided for review by and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications. Lighting plans shall include all existing and proposed lighting for the site, buildings, and kiosks. Canopy lights shall be limited to 25-foot candles, fully non-surface mounted or recessed fixtures in conformance with section 17.0509 sub B sub 1 sub J. 3, that the landscape plans are updated and incorporated code requirements. 4, that all required building, electrical, and sign permits are obtained for the structure and menu boards. And 5, that all final plans, site building, etc. are submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to submission of building permit applications.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Ashley.
Chinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Grillo, aye.
Okay. That will get us to new business and 9A. Consideration, review of conditions and restrictions for a conditional use permit requested by Matthew Mehring, Anderson Ashton for heavy manufacturing and equipment sales and rental on a property at 6340 South Howell and 239 East College Avenue. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was recommended for approval at the previous Plan Commission meeting of May 9th. The current zoning is M1 and B4, and if this proceeds, the rezoning will be incorporated into this as all M1. The conditional use permit request is for heavy manufacturing as well as equipment sales and rental on the property, and additional reviews following conditional use approval will be required. Turning now to the conditions and restrictions, page 2 of 6, starting with section 3, identifies the uses that would be allowed on the property in the M1 district and per the conditions and restrictions as well as code. There shall be no outdoor storage, rental, or sale of equipment, merchandise, parts, supplies, vehicles associated with the business, or any other materials on the property. All equipment, parts, supplies, and merchandise shall be kept interior to the building. All disposed and recycled materials, parts, etc., shall be stored in designated and enclosed trash and recycling receptacles. Combustible, flammable, and other liquid or gas waste shall be stored and disposed of per all applicable fire, state, and federal regulations. Parking shall be limited to employee, visitor, and vehicles associated with the business in striped and parked stalls per code. All signs shall conform to the requirements of code. Everything else is the typical requirements for maintenance and off-site or off-street parking areas with regard to removal of snow. Under Section 4, Parking and Access, parking shall be provided in accordance with code. These conditions and restrictions and plans approved by the Plan Commission. Access to College Avenue in accordance with executed agreements and access management plans is subject to review and approval by the Milwaukee County Department of Transportation. And any such approvals shall be provided to the city prior to permits. Access to Howell Avenue along the west property line is prohibited unless otherwise approved by WISDOT, with those approvals provided to the city prior to issuance of any permits. Any future division and/or development of adjacent parcels shall provide cross-access and pedestrian connections where applicable. Section 5 under lighting just states everything that is required as per code. Section 6, those are setbacks and dimensional requirements per code. Section 8 is the duration of the conditional use permit. We are recommending a term of 10 years prior to needing a renewal. And with that, there is a suggested motion for approval for Plan Commission consideration on the screen. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Put it out to commissioners. Chauncey, you want to start us off?
I do have a question in regards to the duration. Carrie, can you provide more information on 10 years? Because that's a pretty long time.
10 years seems to be standard for industrial type uses that we have recommended in other conditional use permits.
Thank you.
Fred?
Yeah, I have a question about landscaping. Is there anything in there that we could kind of have them dress it up on that corner?
Landscaping per code would require them to address the corner as well, but that would come at site and building plan approval.
It's just that it's the entrance into the city, and you'd like to make it look nice on that
Absolutely.
corner. So I don't know how you could kind of emphasize that.
The importance of this corner in terms of landscaping and architecture has been communicated to the applicants. And we realize that there are several easements out there that are going to require some word I'm looking for, creative approaches to landscaping, but we are going to be looking at that as part of site and building plan approval. And there will be extensive discussion with regard to making sure that everybody is on board with that, addressing the street.
Thank you.
Okay. Don?
No questions.
Chris?
I had no questions.
Greg?
Excuse me, I have no questions regarding the conditions and restrictions. I would just reiterate Commissioner Siepert's comments, as well as note that we did receive an email that kind of brought up similar concerns about that high visibility corner. So, thank you.
Ashley?
No question.
Don?
Nothing for me.
Christine?
Actually, just kind of, I was looking on that, the parcel on the Google Earth here, and this is a beautiful parcel full of landscaping and natural views, and to put like a manufacturer business out there in this beautiful residential across the street from it, I'm not sure this is the best location for that business. So
It was recommended for approval at the last meeting, so this is moving forward to conditions and restrictions. If there's anything that you think we should increase in here or add, I'd be certainly willing to take a look at that.
okay.
Okay. Before I speak, is there anyone from the public here that wanted to say something? Sir, applicant? Name and address, please.
Eric Newman, Anderson Ashton, 3316 West Links Drive, Franklin, Wisconsin. A couple things. Fred, just so you know, I actually talked to the fire chief before we came up here, because we know we have some issues with easements and stuff to kind of limit our landscaping. So I'm trying to create less pavement area to create more opportunities for landscaping. So that is very important to us as well. We've heard the architectural and landscaping needs loud and clear, and our plans will address that information. I did have two questions, and Carrie answered one of them. Was the term seemed short, but I'm not sure what normal is for a conditional use permit time frame. She expressed that 10 years is the normal, so I guess the owner would just be reapplying for that.
Yes.
As long as they behave, everything's cool, or how does that work? I mean,
that is pretty much it, because once again, it's a very, very significant investment. It's very important that the lease is there and that the tenant abides by all city ordinances, and that's what we look for.
they're owning the building, they're not leasing it. So
correct. They're owning
it's
the
even
building,
more
yeah.
important that.
No, you're right.
Okay.
They're owning the building, but what we're really looking for is abidance by those ordinances and make sure that it's working after those number of years, or in some cases it gets repurposed. We've seen that happen.
Right. Okay. Understood. Thank you. And then the only other question I had was just the time of compliance. I'm assuming the 12-month period is from if and when Common Council approves everything. Correct?
That is correct. It's from council approval.
So that's it. Otherwise, I can answer questions if anyone has any more.
Okay.
Chris Jazowski, 143 West College Avenue. I've stated what I've stated in the past. I have a letter here that I just received today, addressed to the Oak Creek Planning Commission, read development of College and Howell Avenue corner parcel. I really don't want to read it. Could somebody else read it for me? Can I submit it into the record?
I can read it for you if you'd
Thank
like to. All the commissioners received a email, I believe it was a group email, and it read the following. Oak Creek. I believe I have the same one. Okay. Different letter.
Yes.
This is actually a letter, not an email. I am writing, dear commissioners, I am writing about your plan to have the southeast corner of College Avenue and Howell to become an industrial park. I grew up in Milwaukee. I now regularly travel back and forth between Florida and Wisconsin. I often fly into Mitchell Airport, as which you know is a mile or so from the Oak Creek border. One would know that College Avenue is where Milwaukee ends. There's no big sign saying welcome to Oak Creek, nor is there a mention of a nearby park with features that reflect the city's name, the walking trails through oak trees and along meandering creeks of Cudahy Woods. Nor is there an indication that a nice college, which will soon have a ballpark, is right down the road. Few people know Oak Creek has footage on the lake, on Lake Michigan, where Bender Park is located. So when I heard that an industrial park was going to be built at Oak Creek's gateway, I laughed out loud. A place called Oak Creek should not be industrial, especially when it has amenities above described. That door closed long ago for Oak Creek, which is a great blessing in disguise. For too long, Oak Creek has been a pretty girl pretending to be a workhorse. It is understandable that the comprehensive plan dictates what goes where, obstinately to maximize tax revenue. The conventional logic used to be that industry was the way to do that. Times have changed, commissioners. Here is real-life examples illustrates the situations. Winter Park, Florida is a city on the Lake Apocopa that up until about the 1950s had been a thriving bass fishing resort. However, the comprehensive plan for the area dictated that heavy agriculture, also known as agribusiness mass vegetable production or muck farm, should be developed on the shores of the lake. Several decades of that kind of mass farming resulted in the buildup of all manners of chemicals in the soil and water. The lake has become too polluted to sustain bass fishing, The fishing disappeared, businesses closed, and finally the people left. Even the plants became too hard to sustain. The city was chronically on the brink of bankruptcy. Then around 2000, somebody finally had the idea to abandon the failed comprehensive plan for the area. They turned to the old abandoned train tracks that ran through the center of town and turned it into a bike trail. Simultaneously, the process of cleaning up the lake was begun. By 2008, Winter Garden became a very charming, bustling destination city because most of the shaded trails and conventional downtown and the convenient downtown trailhead. A very nice gateway to Winter Park area has a large fountain and a small stage for live music. It's always filled with locals and visitors alike. You should visit it. Tax revenue is abundant. The lake is clean again. Even the fishing has returned. Basically, Winter Garden is the pretty girl that finally learned to actuate her assets. Oak Creek should do the same and accept the reality that the comprehensive plan miscategorized you. Dress up that border corner as a marketing campaign for Oak Creek and be the lovely city you are. Sincerely, John McCormick.
You can keep it. We need to dress up that corner. We don't need a factory there. Please, consider what we're doing here. We need the green space. We don't need more manufacturing, not 10 years, not 5 years, not 1 year. We need the green space back. Keep the green space. Why is there an Oak Creek? What is Oak Creek? And finally, 2 nights ago, there was a great big fire, Slinger. And what's it called? The Oak Creek Pallet Company. We have Oak Creek Pallet Company down here. Are they connected to each other? Connections, people. Connections. We need the green space. Put the factory somewhere else.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else before I go? Okay. I'll get my 2 cents in. I do agree with Alderman Lorick and Alderman Seifert, although, we'll get a kick at the can at the landscaping. Actually, there are a few corrections in there. There actually is a welcome to Oak Creek sign directly on the west side of the street there on the corner. I'd love to work with the applicant to really enhance that Oak Creek welcome sign, as that property by the owner is currently for sale, and we could possibly lose our easement right there, and how that exists, and work something in to really make this a benefit to the city. I do agree. We really want to dress this up. I don't know if you were here when this went through council. This is far from typical factory. This is really an industrial business building. It's what it is. It's classified as heavy manufacture because the parts they work on are heavy. They're not using drop forges, nor are they manufacturing anything here. It's a repair shop, a rebuild shop. So that's really the extent of it. It's really quite a nice looking building for what's proposed there. Contrary to some opinions, that lot is not pretty right now. It's actually kind of a dumping spot for pallets and things of that nature. This really just affects the corner. The rest is kind of a blank slate to be determined. When they came in, they kind of had proposals going a little farther to the south. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just the conditions and restrictions for this business looking to locate into Oak Creek. Time of compliance, that's pretty standard. I know the 10-year in the industrial world, that is pretty short. When you get into industrial manufacturing, you're making quite an investment. But I'm fine with it. As it does give us the leverage to go in and correct any possible issues that we haven't in 10 years, and we should if they're a bad player, whether it's light pollution or storing things outside and things of that nature, not keeping the property up. So from our basis, we do have a compliance officer, and we intend to keep an eye on it, without a doubt. We have not heard from the fire department, and they come here for a purpose, and I like to use them because they are a subject matter expert, and this would be a building that they would probably visit frequently with inspections and visits. Mike?
Good evening again, Mayor and Commissioners. So the building design that we've looked at satisfies, it's really based on codes. So fire code, water supply codes, things of that nature, hazard commodity codes, those have to be met during the building permit phase. So those are satisfied based on the plan reviews that we receive. And like the mayor said, that is a code inspection, so that building gets a semi-annual inspection two times a year, so semi-annual, so that's when we're there. Outside of any other code violations or reported things for that we would need to be there for. So I think we've made comments before that I mentioned the hazard commodity, their classification of the building. The suppression system will be designed and built to the operations of the business. So if there's any other questions, I'll feel free to answer those.
Any other questions for a call for a motion? Okay, seeing none, motion.
Yes, actually, I do have a question.
Okay.
Actually, mostly to Carrie. You ask what can we add or what can we do, right? So looking at that parcel and being zoned as an M1 and it being on the corner, is there any way we can shield it kind of like with trees from the outside? So from the corner, whoever is coming into a creek, so it doesn't look from the outside like there is a big manufacturer, trucks entering or exiting or from that sort. So it's shielding that building itself.
That would be something that would be addressed at site and building plan review, but as of right now, the landscape code would require them to meet certain requirements in terms of screening, of parking, and things like that.
How about limiting access to, limiting impact to landscaping that existing there?
I'm not sure how we could really do that. They would have to meet landscape
Have you seen that
code.
a lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any like wetland or any?
The wetland is not, well, the wetland is not actually part of this review at this time. It would be part of site and building plan review. And if they have any impacts to that, or if there's a DNR permit for it, that would be addressed at site and building plan review.
So in the future, if that's the case, maybe that would be my next one, to limit any wetland impact if possible.
We do have that 15-foot buffer, or
Okay.
the 15-foot setback with the 5-foot undisturbed buffer as per code. So that would already be one of the code requirements that they would have to meet.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, that will balance between what that gentleman was concerns about that entrance and the landscaping, which I kind of agree with him, but also we already have that parcel as M1 and we need that type of business here in Oak Creek. So we kind of, if we can get to a balance, that will be a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, and you know, without getting into site and building plan review, basically what we were saying in here is code requirements, except for what has been amended specifically, still apply. So you still have your transition zones, you still have your buffers, you still have your setbacks, you still have all of your requirements that are in the code for the landscaping itself. There are some, again, challenges with regard to the locations of easements out there when it comes to tree placement, but we can address that at site and building plan review, obviously, making sure that we still incorporate those landscape code requirements. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion? Okay, motion on 9A.
Seifert moves that the Planning Commission recommends that the Common Council adopt the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit for heavy manufacturing and equipment sales and rental on the properties at 6340 South Howell Avenue and 239 East College Avenue.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call, beginning with Greg.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Chinsky, aye.
Okay. As I stated, items B, 9B, that was for a conditional use permit for the properties at 7101 and 7115 South Pennsylvania. Are requested to be rescheduled to June 13th. We need a hold motion on that, correct? No? We're good? Just an announcement? And then item C is also rescheduled to June 13th, and it concerns the same properties at 7101, 7115 South Pennsylvania Avenue. and that was review site and building plans. That will get us into D, which is a plan review for site building and related plans by XL Engineering for a 64 by 50 accessory building and parking lot expansion at the property at 8519 South 13th. Sylvia.
This is for the Faith Baptist Church and School at 8519 South 13th. They're proposing to add a new garage to be used for storage and maintenance of their buses, and they're also proposing to expand their existing parking lot. This is the overall site plan. I'm going to split my presentation, talk about the garage first, and follow up with the parking expansion. The garage is on the northwest portion of the site. Here's the site plan. Overall, their proposal meets code. There are a few revisions that will be necessary, but we can work with the applicant on these prior to building permits. The main one is that the plans should show the location of the propane tank that will be used for this building. And then the other one is just a minor clarification to make sure that the height of the proposed garage does not exceed the height of the primary building. Here are the elevations proposed for that bus garage. And then moving on to the parking lot expansion, the part that is being expanded is the northeast corner, kind of shaded in gray here. They're going to be adding a total of 58 new stalls, removing 7, so a net addition of 51 stalls. And then staff has identified a few revisions to the landscaping that would be needed to make to meet code. The addition of an island in this northern row of parking, additional landscaping in each of these parking islands shown. Each should have 2 trees and at least 75% living ground cover. A few shrubs need to be added in this eastern landscaping, and we're also recommending the addition of landscaping on the northern edge of the parking lot as well. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I have a suggested motion.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Before I go to the commission, anybody in the audience like to get up and speak? Here, you can wait for questions then if we have them. So, Christine, you want to start us off?
I have no questions.
Okay, Dawn?
Nothing for me.
Ashley?
Just to continue to work with the engineering department on updating the stormwater management plan. So currently there's a pond that exists on the parcel, and just to work with us to make sure that that's updated.
Greg?
No concerns against the proposal. Does the parking lot expansion, does the setback take into account any future improvements to 13th Street? I believe the county is planning on putting sidewalks along 13th in that stretch.
Sure.
Want to make sure the parking lot's set far enough back
We'll
from
need
the
your name and
sidewalk.
address, sir.
Sure. Eric Drazkowski, 100 Camelot Drive, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Thanks for having us here on behalf of Faith Baptist. On the plans, there is actually shown the 45-foot wide ultimate right-of-way. Actually, it might be that dash line that's kind of clipped right there. So it's going to be that one. And then the front yard would be 17 feet, so 70 minus 45 will be 15 feet. So we'll be right at the setback there for that ultimate right away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Chris?
No questions. Looks good to me.
Don?
No questions.
Fred?
No questions.
Josie?
I do have a question. So the garage height is identified at 20 feet. Can you share what the height is of the primary structure on the property?
That I do not know, to be honest.
So is the garage
guess.
taller or shorter?
Oh, it's shorter, much shorter.
I would guess it's far
much
shorter.
shorter, yep.
That's a large church.
Yep.
Did an
It's much
addition
shorter.
some years back with a gym and everything.
And it'll be obviously on the west side, so it'll be screened from 13th Street.
Thank you.
A well-kept church too, by the way. Oh, I guess I'm up. I don't have any questions. I'm actually really glad you're taking the incentive to house your buses. Not only will it keep the property looking nice, probably get extra mileage out of the buses as well, and cut down on anybody that may try to fool around with them. I will ask you to yield the podium. I think our assistant chief has some input to it.
Well, I can.
Sorry, Mike, I forgot to drag you out of the back row again.
Good evening, back again. Just to clarify, so we did have to review the site plan just to determine that the occupancy was for storage and not a repair facility, so that the conditions of the building would not require a suppression system, but it is only for basically storage and no hot work, no repairs that will be conducted with the buses inside the garage.
So no sprinklers.
Yeah, the building does not require a sprinkler system. Based on its occupancy classification, it's for storage. So that's why we want to just reiterate with the applicant that no repairs or facility repairs can be conducted there, because that would change the occupancy classification, which would then require a suppression system.
Thank you for that, Mike. Appreciate it. As I said, I don't have any problems with it. I think you commissioners covered it well. So with that, I'll ask for a motion on D.
Board moves to approve the site and building plan submitted by Eric Drazkowski, Excel Engineering, for the parking lot expansion and new bus and maintenance garage at 8519 South 13th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that a landscaping plan is submitted in conformance with code requirements for parking lot island landscaping, perimeter parking lot landscaping, and landscaping to the north of the parking lot addition. 3, that plans are revised to show location of propane tank on garage along with any required screening. 4, that applicant coordinates with engineering on stormwater requirements. And 5, that all final plans, site, building, etc. are submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call, beginning with me. Aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seipert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Kupczynski, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Okay, that will get us to item E, and that is review of a certified survey map submitted by East Rawson Avenue LLC, combining refiguring Milwaukee County right-of-way on the property at 140 East Rawson. Sylvia?
Yes, this is a certified site map or survey map to combine property at 140 East Rawson with right-of-way that the applicant is acquiring from Milwaukee County. The purpose of this is to allow for development as proposed in the upcoming plan review, which is the next item on the agenda. This is the proposed CSM. You can see towards the northwest portion of the site is that is the right-of-way that they're acquiring. They will be maintaining an easement to provide access to the adjacent properties. And with that, I have a suggested motion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, before I go on with this one, applicant, anybody, you want to say anything, sir, or you want to wait for questions? Okay, applicant has indicated he'll wait on questions. Chauncey, you want to start?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Fred?
No questions.
Don?
No questions.
Chris?
No questions.
Greg?
No questions.
Ashley?
No questions.
Dawn?
Nothing for me.
Christine?
Nothing here.
Nothing on my behalf either. So, with that, I'll ask for a motion, please.
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Jason at Kilski or Kulski, St. John's property at 140 West Rawson Avenue be approved to the following condition. 1, that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording.
Seipert seconds.
Roll
Just
call.
one clarification, the address is 140 East Rawson.
Minutes should reflect that. 140 East Rawson as the address.
Right. Seifert sake.
I have a second. Fred's
Seconds agreed.
seconds agreed with change. Roll call, beginning with Chris.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, I.
Grillo, aye.
Jinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
And Bukevich, aye. Okay. Moving right along to item F. It is a plan review of site, building, and related plans submitted by St. John Properties for a multi-tenant commercial building on the property at 140 East Rawson Avenue. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a site plan review for the final building of this development. And with the CSM that was just recommended for approval, they get a little bit extra room to work with in terms of setbacks for that proposed building. So that's part of the reason why that frontage road was acquired. The zoning of the property has been changed to B4. There are several conditional use permits on the property. As we've reviewed previously, the proposal is for a roughly 48,000 square foot multi-tenant speculative commercial building. Again, this is building A, the final building of the development. And we are going to go through just a few things, kind of in linear progression. So we do have one change that is going to be required in terms of compliance for dimensional requirements, and that's the northern setback for the building. It's currently sitting at about 22 feet, and the setback requirement is 25 feet. So there has to be some kind of change there in order to make that setback requirement. The access easement has been required by Milwaukee County DOT, to maintain that frontage road access to those properties to the west, as Sylvia mentioned in the previous report. And if we talk about parking for a moment, a couple of things. The majority of the parking is proposed on the west side of the building. Minimum parking requirements are 1 for every 250 square feet of building, which equates to about 192 stalls overall. Now, we know that this is a development that has shared parking amongst the buildings, but there's a bit of a concern with the proposed parking that's shown between buildings A and B. Plan commissioners may recall that there was a parking expansion in this area approved for the LabCorp tenant on the northern portion of Building B. In this case, there are an additional 7 stalls that are being proposed on the Building A portion of that parking area. So while the plans show 184 stalls west of the building, they're showing an additional 7 here, still short of what would be required, and we haven't received a modification request. But there are some concerns with this parking area. Before we move on, bike parking is located in 2 parts of the building, so we fulfill that requirement. The reason that these parking stalls between the 2 buildings is concerning is for a couple of reasons. One, they're showing 10 loading docks on the east side of this proposed building. It's a loading dock area. The development had always anticipated for there to be a loading dock area between the 2 buildings, but that didn't anticipate parking in that loading dock area, especially that shared area. Without any turning movements, we are unsure whether or not trucks and vehicles can successfully maneuver in that area without disturbing those parking stalls, without disturbing that fire hydrant and the existing guardrail, nor do we know that that dumpster enclosure is accessible for truck maintenance or truck accessibility. So we do have a few concerns and questions about that. They're showing a just over 31 and a half drive aisle there. Even if these were box trucks that were accessing these proposed loading docks, we're still not sure that turning radius works. But without the movements, we can't verify that. So those are some questions that we have. The LabCorp tenant space was approved for 28 parking stalls in that area. And the expansion of the 7 parking stalls just to meet the code requirements. At this point, staff is not in a position where we can recommend that moving forward. A couple things with the landscaping. We have a few things that are missing for code compliance. One of them being dimensions and planting depths for the islands and making sure that we have 75% living ground cover, no stone mulch, those kinds of things that are just minor at this point. But we are also missing the fact that the northwest corner does border on a residential property. So technically per code that requires transition zone C, which means an enhanced landscape area for a depth of about 15 feet. So we do have some shrubs and trees in that area, it just needs to be enhanced. Additionally, there is a requirement for shrubs to be planted along the length of the trash enclosure. We only have part of it affected by the landscaping. And then finally, the landscape island that was acquired as part of the frontage road. They are proposing landscaping there, which is fantastic, but we do need to make sure that those overhead utilities in the area allow for the landscaping as proposed. If not, there are some considerations that need to be made, and that would have to be either enhanced landscaping further up to the north, which there's not a whole lot of room to enhance there, or planting any kind of shrubbery plantings at a maximum height that would be allowed by the utility. So those are some things that we can work with the applicant to ensure that those landscape plans come into code compliance. Just kind of enhancing those areas to get an idea of what's being proposed where. Excuse me. The green box is the northwest corner along the residential property. The orange box is showing the landscaping in the vicinity of the trash enclosure. The blue box is showing that Rawson Avenue frontage island. On the screen right now is the proposed floor plan. Each one of those yellow boxes represents an overhead dock door. So one of the recommendations or one of the options that staff has proposed is to show some of those overhead dock doors as future if they cannot be eliminated altogether. And the ones that would be shown as future, the ones that might have the conflicts with the fire hydrant and guardrail, with the parking stalls, and the trash enclosure is farther north, but it's still in the same vicinity. Turning now to the building, the materials for the building itself. Proposed to be thin split face block, thin brick, and EIFS. EIFS, as you will recall, is allowed up to a maximum of 15% of the elevation with a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission. And while we did receive materials calculations, the incorporated glazing code requires that the materials calculations exclude glazing. So we just need to have that updated. Windows are proposed on all of the elevations. Majority, of course, are on the elevations that have entrances, and then the north and the south. There are also aluminum awnings and canopies that are proposed over the entries. The entries are on the west. And any RTUs, rooftop mechanical units, or ground building, other transformers, utility boxes, other mechanicals, those also have to be screened per code. These are just color elevations of the proposed building. The north, or the top, is the west elevation, middle is the east elevation, and then the bottom is the north and south. We do recommend hold, and just before we get to that, lighting per code, we do have a requirement for all the fixtures to be at maximums in the appropriate locations. Anywhere adjacent to residential, that you're limited to 3,500. Anywhere else, 5,000. Full cutoff fixtures, fully shielded, directed downward. Accent wash, they are proposing some sconces on the west elevation and wall packs on the east elevation. So the sconces would be limited to that maximum 2,000 source lumens, not mounted any higher than the highest point of the building, etc. And the signs that were shown, those are just placeholders. They will need to go for a master sign plan in the future. So, because we have a few questions and concerns with these proposed plans, we are recommending hold. Or if the Plan Commission is comfortable with the plans with the conditions that we've recommended, we do also have a motion for consideration of approval. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before I take it to the commission applicant, would you like to say a few words? You want to? It's up to you. Yeah, we'll need you. Got to be on the mic, and we need your name and address, please.
My name is Jason Akilski. I'm with St. John Properties. Address is 2000 Pewaukee Road, Suite A, Waukesha, Wisconsin. I don't know. Are we able to go back to the first? So the property was initially zoned M1 and then recently zoned B4 due to all the conditional use permits. The building, the engineers placed the building there. We are 3 feet, over the setback. I don't know if there's a variance. Otherwise, the building can be shifted to the south, but the curb lines then don't kind of line up. As you can see at the entrance, there'll just be a little notch in the one by the new building. But we can definitely shift the building to the south.
Great. Question for you. How did the other two buildings get away with it?
Different zoning district at the time they were developed, which had a different setback requirement.
Great answer. Correct one, too, I guess.
So I understand that this is only 3
Yeah.
feet, but we don't have the ability at the Plan Commission to grant
No.
variances. That would have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So the
Correct.
recommendation is just to shift the building.
Okay, yeah, so we can, I'll have that building shifted.
Or you lose an entire bay, which probably isn't in your best interest.
No, but I can, like I said, I talked with engineers. We can shift that building down to 3 feet. So, we able to go to the next. The parking here in the back. If we just kind of take a mental image of this, we added the 7 stalls onto the 28. That was for LabCorp to get the amount of parking we needed for code. We can take the single spot off the north end and add 2 more spots to the south end and not interfere with the docks that are on the existing building. On the latest elevation of the east, we proposed pulling out the overhead doors and just putting storefront glazing. So I believe that's page 107. So if you see on the bottom, we have storefront in place of the overhead doors so that there is no issue with the trucking. I mean, they'll just be glass.
Good idea.
Yeah, so to try to eliminate that issue there. So it'll be the 5, starting from, what is that, the north, coming down 5 bays, and then there'll be 5 other overhead doors on the other side.
On the west side as
On the,
well. You won't have any overheads.
on the west. No, that'll be all storefront.
Okay.
So,
By my count, and maybe I'm counting incorrectly, you would still need to lose 1 more because of the conflict. But we can talk about that.
okay. So that we took that into consideration and just had the doors removed and storefront put in the place of those. And then the landscape architect engineer has staff's comments and their plans are getting revised to accommodate for all the red flags that we received on that.
Okay. I think you're pretty much in tune on what staff's looking for. Unfortunately, I do think there's some things to work out, and they're pretty significant. But it's important to get the input here. Whether this results in a hold or whatever it results in, it is valuable to come here and get this input. And I will give each commissioner their chance to input as well. So, before I do that, I'll see if Fire wants to comment. They may have some sound advice going forward too, as far as turning radiuses, stuff like that.
Good evening again, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Cavey with Fire. Yeah, we want to confirm the turning radiuses for our vehicles and equipment. And also, we just want to establish where the water supply we've already discussed, with the locations of those that can be reconciled during the permitting phase for our underground plan reviews to make sure those are all by calculations and code requirements. So basically, it's some of the fire department access and conforming to the turning radiuses for our vehicles.
Okay. The two existing buildings, they locate your fire connections up at
Yeah,
south
they're on the south face of the building, and we just got to ensure that those hydrants. There's one dedicated for that fire department connection. Another hydrant has to have within 300 feet of the building for firefighting purposes. So where they're located, we just got to verify that that does conform to the codes.
So you'll have to confer with fire as well.
Yeah. So when we do underground plan reviews, aside from the water utility, because that terminates the water utilities, so they may be public hydrants, but for the fire suppression systems, then it goes to a private side, and we have a consultant that will do the plan reviews and recommend the approvals or some modifications as necessary.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any questions for Mike? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Carrie, you got something you want to say? Okay, we'll go a little out of order. Anything from traffic engineering?
No,
Stormwater?
just what Carrie had stated with concerns with turning movements, if there are going to be dock doors there. Stormwater has already been accounted for with the initial build-up.
Okay. Dawn? Christine?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about drainage, but you have addressed that, and of course the turning movement. So that should be it for now. Oh, just one more thing. How about when you acquired that parcel from the county? Was there any like utility easement there that you have acquired with it, or no?
Yeah, we have easements drafted, but nobody will sign until we own the property, which we're all set up to purchase. We just want to make sure that the CSM.
Those utility easements, is that with DOT, We Energies, or city, or all of the above?
It depends.
Carrie?
In that area, it wouldn't be city. It would all be either We
Me too.
Energies or, I don't think that's ATC there, but I don't know.
It's We Energies.
Yeah, we have We Energies, Wisconsin Bell is there, and then Charter is up around the corner. So.
Okay, that's it.
Greg?
No additional concerns. I would just obviously echo what staff had concerns on. I would push to hold the item. I know we've seen things like this in the past where many of the commissioners don't like to kind of engineer things and fix problems on the fly. And with a 4-page motion and 12 or 14 conditions, it does seem like a lot, and some serious ones that should be looked at before the final approval.
Well said. Jossie?
I do have a question about accessing the property and maintaining that easement. Do you have any feedback in regards to that one?
As far as we'll maintain that frontage road, green space, as we would the property as far as the landscaping goes, and remove snow and salt accordingly.
Now, Gary, does that address the issue that we had in our report?
With regard to the landscaping, that's something that we would have to get input on from the utility. Not the water and sewer utility, but We Energies, if they own that easement. If the overhead wires prevent them from planting trees, then we'll need a revised landscape plan. And that would be something that we would have to coordinate.
Sorry to interrupt. I spoke with We Energies, and all the trees and shrubs that are proposed there are low growing, and it's at our own risk that they could get ripped out in the future, and then we'd obviously have to replace them at our cost. But the intent is to try to clean up that green space there so it looks presentable with the rest of the property.
Yeah, if there's any correspondence from We Energies to that effect, we'd appreciate a copy, just so that we have it on file.
Okay.
And then another question in regards to parking. So the plan was shared parking and now it's changing a little. Can you provide feedback on that?
Well, the parking in the back is the 28 spots for LabCorp, and we added the 7 so that we could meet the code requirement for the building. But I mean, we're kind of limited on space on the west side, so we added the additional spots on the east side just to meet parking code.
Now, Carrie, were there challenges with those 7 spaces where they were located?
Yes, that's part of the reason. The entire area for the loading docks with regard to the potential conflicts with the parking in this area, with the potential conflict with the access to the trash enclosure, those were all concerns. I think the elimination of those 7 parking stalls with the option for the applicant to submit a modification request to the Plan Commission, I think that's a better solution than adding more parking stalls in the rear that could potentially cause conflict. But again, we need the turning movements to really make sure that that's a valid concern, but it is right now.
Thank you.
Fred?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about parking myself. What happens if you change the occupancy of the building itself? In other words, different people come in and go at different times. Can we handle that parking situation if we increase the people inside these buildings?
Well, the parking is based on a ratio of the square footage for a commercial building. So it is based on a maximum occupancy for commercial uses at this point, 1 for every 250 square feet. So yes, they would be short a few stalls if they were to submit a modification request, but it would be short by about 7 or 8. We're not talking about like a huge number of parking stalls. And, you know, this is kind of typical for a multi-tenant commercial building to have, you know, those square footage kind of dictate how many stalls would be required. We do also have the ability for shared parking on the rest of the development if there's enough shared parking for the rest of the tenants. Not the greatest, but there is that option.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Don?
No questions.
Chris?
No question.
Okay. I kind of gave my commentary. It's probably prudent to hold it. I think Greg summed it up very well. We'll work through this. We'll get there. Just got to do a few things, but that variance is huge. That's a big one. You guys got to get around there. Setback.
I'll just have that building moved down so we won't need a variance.
I mean, you can go for it without a
Yeah,
doubt.
okay.
It's 3 feet, but does align the buildings and probably gives them a better overall look.
I mean, 3 feet is probably not even going to be that noticeable for being misaligned. So I would just, I as a staff would recommend just moving the building.
Either way, of course, parking, but you got the input. So at this time, we'll ask for a motion on. Smokes, is that F? F.
Clerk moves to hold item 9F until the next Plan Commission meeting,
That would be June 13th.
June 13th, 2023.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call, beginning with Don.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Chinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
David Chai.
Guzekowski.
Okay, good luck, sir.
Thanks.
Item 9G is consideration of a conditional use permit submitted by Arch Solar C&I for a conditional use permit for a rooftop solar panel at the River Arms multifamily residential buildings on the properties at 520 and 557 West Riverwood Drive. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request to add rooftop solar panels to 5 of the 6 apartment buildings for Riverwood Arms Estates. There is one building that has the same or similar rooftop panels that are being proposed for the other buildings. They will be mounted to the southernmost sections, and they are going to be flush in conformance with code. The 3 buildings north of Riverwood Drive in this image are included in the request, and the 2 buildings that have been identified here with arrows. Those would also have the panels. You can see in each of these graphics where those panels are proposed. And to give you an idea of what we're looking at, this is the existing the existing building that incorporates those panels. So it would be similar to what's already there. And staff have no concerns for the proposal. There is just one request by the fire department that has been passed along, and that's to add emergency cutoffs in the plans. With that, there's a suggested motion for consideration on the screen. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Applicant, anybody want to say anything going forward? Or you want to wait on questions? Yeah, I guess we can wait on questions. Okay. Chauncey, you want to start us off?
I do have a question for the applicant.
Okay.
Your name and address.
Andrew Holmstrom, 1045 West Calumet Road, River Hills, Wisconsin, 53217.
So for the energy collection, just a quick question. Is that to assist the individuals that will live there to help their prices with their utilities?
Not directly. So per We Energy's requirements, only one solar array can offset 1 meter on a property. So the owner, Riverwood Legacy LLC, I believe is their official name, is using this to offset the public meters with the idea that in the future they will offer EV charging stations to tenants and use this energy to provide power for that.
Thank you.
Fred?
No questions.
Don?
No questions.
Chris?
No questions.
Greg?
No questions.
Ashley?
No questions.
Dawn?
Nothing for me.
Christine?
Just out of curiosity, how is this maintained?
That's kind of the beauty of solar. So it's, you set it and forget it. We have a team at Arch that checks in weekly to make sure there are no errors with the system. These ones specifically have panel level monitoring. So if the third panel in the top row is out, we'll get a notification saying, hey, this panel's not producing power like it should. And then we reach out to them and head out to the site.
I've seen this a lot in Florida and California, and of course the weather is different, but here in Wisconsin with that ice and snow and all of that, so I'm not sure how does it perform in that cold winter season and fall season. So.
Yeah, so efficiency-wise better. The panels and the wires like it when it's colder.
Okay.
But being that we get more sun hours in the summer, it's going to produce more power.
Okay.
So I think Florida has like a rough per kilowatt installed, and these are each 41 kilowatts. You get like 1,400 kilowatt hours per year, and in Wisconsin we get between 1,100 and 1,200.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
I got long as you're up here, I'm going to ask questions anyways. Need some education. So, how many panels are total in each building? Are they identical array systems?
Yes. So they each consist of 41.4 kilowatts. They're 450 watt panels apiece. So 41,000.
How many panels?
I think 92.
92. How many units per building?
I don't know that. Oh, wait, of the solar, or like of apartment
Well,
buildings?
you said only one panel per apartment.
No, one meter.
Usually there's a meter per apartment.
I may have misspoke. So all of the panels are going to be hooked up to the apartment's public use meter. So they're going to offset each building. So the garage spaces, the elevator.
Okay. And then secondly, will everybody be licensed? We've had licensing problems of people doing work unlicensed.
Yep. We're contractor licensed, master electrician licensed.
Everybody on site?
everybody, well, so the installation team that's doing the DC work, we call it, so installing the racking, the panels, aren't required to be licensed electricians, but anyone working on what's considered high voltage, so anything over 80 volts will be a licensed electrician.
Had a lot of problems with people, unlicensed, unqualified people working on systems. So I'll leave it at that. Just kind of give you a heads up.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, if anybody heads out to site, they're welcome to at any time. We'll be adhering to all regulations.
Other than
Mr.
that,
Mayor,
yes.
per the narrative, each array, and there are 5, because it's 1 per building, right? Has 92 modules.
Right, that's what he had said.
Yeah.
But originally he said 1 panel per
I think it was 1.
apartment or meter.
Yeah.
Which would have meant there's a lot of extra stuff going on there. There's probably not 92 apartments per
No, I don't actually know the number, but
No,
it's,
but it-
each array has 92 modules.
He clarified.
Yeah.
So, okay. Cool. All right. Further discussion? Questions? Okay, motion.
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approves conditional use permit allowing roof-mounted solar energy collection systems on the apartment buildings on properties at 520 and 557 West Riverwood Drive after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that be prepared for the Plan Commission's review at the next meeting, June 13th.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with you, Fred.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, I.
Grillo, aye.
Kupczynski, aye.
Lorick, aye. Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Okay.
Donnie, aye.
Moving right along, 9H, review site buildings and related plans, Roe Creek Franklin School District for a 20 by 24 accessory structure at Carrollton Elementary School, 8965 South Carrollton Drive. Sylvia.
Thank you. As you said, this is a plan review for the construction of a 20-foot by 24-foot pergola. It will be on the southwest side of the building at 8965 South Carrollton Drive. Here's the site plan showing setbacks as well as the aerial showing the location of the proposed pergola. And then this is the rough plan for the pergola, as mentioned, 20 by 24 feet, and it will be a metal structure. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I forgot to put the suggested motion on the slide, but it's in the staff report.
Excellent. Okay, applicant want to say anything before we start? Come on up, sir. You waited a long time here.
Simplest one to look at.
Name and address, me too.
Steve Rohde, 7283 South 35th Street, Franklin, Wisconsin. I'm the Director of Buildings and Grounds for the school district. And I just wanted to say that our PTO for Carrollton did a wonderful job of raising the funds for this structure. And it does have some wonderful safety things for the school. There's often times where the kids are playing and they'll get overheated and things like that, and be able to just go under the shade and not have to go in the building and have another adult escort them. They can go there, and also benefit to the community. When they're playing ball, you saw the ball diamonds around there in the tennis courts. There's oftentimes parents bring other siblings. They're playing on the playground equipment. They need to take a break and get out of the sun while their brother or sister is playing a baseball game or something like that. So I think it's a well thought out, project for the PTO to help the school with.
It's going to be great. Well, I'll let it go for questions, commissioners. So, guess we'll start. Christine?
I was just going to ask about the material.
The material is a tube steel with a steel roof, and there will be concrete pylons from each corner, as required. We paid for the engineered drawings up front, and they do want a concrete slab just in between the four corners so that there's no mud or things that accumulate underneath there, because there won't be a lot of sun to dry it out. And so it's a very simple structure.
So we're hoping that it's a wonderful addition to the.
Just from a mother perspective, sometimes those concrete bases worry me, like the kids running and hitting their head in those bases. So if there is any way to kind of shield them with some landscape or bushes or something from that sort, that would be.
We often talk about that, but then we're always reminded from the security aspect of things that we don't want anything that's going to create a place where a stranger can approach the school from behind bushes or things like that. And at night, it's better to not have any of that ground stuff around that building so that you can clearly see if somebody's in there lurking or just hanging out, if you will, for the older kids, if you want to use that term. So yeah, we think through a lot of that stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dawn?
Nothing for me.
Ashley?
No questions, thank you.
Greg?
No concerns, thanks.
Chris?
None.
Don?
No questions.
Fred?
No questions.
Chauncey?
No questions, thank you.
I have none myself either. It was all answered. You put slabbed on there. With that, motion, please.
Clerk moves to approve site building and related plans submitted by Steve Road, Oak Creek Franklin Joint School District for a 20-foot by 24-foot accessory structure on the Carrollton Elementary School property at 8965 South Carrollton Drive.
Guzekowski will second.
There are a couple of conditions, 1 through 3.
Apologize. With the following conditions. Number 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that the height of the pergola does not exceed 20 feet or the height of the primary building. And 3, that all final plans, site building, etc. are submitted in digital form for review by the Department of Community Development prior to submission of building permit applications.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call, beginning with Commissioner Chandler.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Grillo, aye.
Kupczynski, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Okay, and before we get to adjournment, just a couple announcements. We are coming up. This is Memorial Day weekend, so take some time and honor those that gave the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. We will be having a short memorial service at Forest Hill Cemetery. It's located on Forest Hill Drive there off 15th Avenue. That is on the 29th at 9 a.m. It's put on by the local Legion. You can go pay your respects there on that morning. And more importantly, for a very short time, we have a very important art exhibit out here, if you haven't noticed, at City Hall. And if you're streaming in and want to watch, it's the Stars and Stripe Honor Flight Traveling Art Show. It's a depiction of all the honor flights of the men and women that served our country and are taken out there to see the respective memorials and the battles and the wars they served in, and the people that took them there. It's really takes some time. We've done a lot of art things here, but nothing more appropriate than that on this given weekend. So please take advantage of that if you can. And then the buzz around town, rock and wrestling event at Drexel Square, June the 3rd, 2 to 6, something different they're trying in Town Square, and everywhere I go, that's all they seem to want to talk about. So check it out on the 3rd. So that is it. So with that, motion for adjournment.
Grillo moves to adjourn at 7:58.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Christine.
Hannah, I.
Grillo, aye.
Kupczynski, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.